is foreign policy, talking about what America's foreign policy goals are, and we're going to kind of see that during that, the world's foreign policy goals will kind of fall in line with America's foreign policy goals. Should be a little more interesting than when I talked about finance a few weeks ago. At least I try to make it. So let's go ahead. Next one, please. All right, 2 critical questions. What does America hope to achieve in the world? And what problems do we have realizing these goals? There's no one answer to these questions. It's a long list of questions. So I want to hear some of your ideas before we get started about what do you think America hopes to achieve in the world? World domination. Peace. No wrong answers yet.
Freedom and democracy.
Freedom and democracy. Anything else? Okay.
Liberty.
Liberty, absolutely. Kind of with peace and democracy, but absolutely liberty. What about trading? We want to make money, don't we?
Right.
Definitely. What problems are we going to face in promoting world domination, peace and democracy, liberty, trade?
Everybody don't view the same point.
Perfectly said. Not everybody has those same goals. Not everybody necessarily wants America to have those goals.
Excuse the announcement. Students, I need your attention for 1 second. As a family, and as the principal of this family, I'm disturbed about some of the behaviors that have been exhibited lately with these fights.
Not including seniors.
Number one, it's not everyone, but the people involved, you're not using your conflict resolution skills. It's people that work in this building to assist with any issues or concerns. So, we're in the month of April, you might as well say.
All right, guys.
What class is that
I haven't heard yet.
Number 1, very good. World domination, world peace, trade, promoting liberty and justice. Good. Problems that we're realizing, not everybody has those same goals. So what does it look like when we try to promote liberty, peace, trade with a country that doesn't have those goals?
We get backlash.
What does that look like?
Wars or treaties that don't go through.
There you go. Wars and failed treaties. Very good. Next one, please. So this is a map that just kind of highlights the countries in the world that have a positive view on the United States and a negative view on the United States. So the darker the blue, the more positive. You can see we like ourselves a whole lot. And the darker the red, the less positive view. So you can see over here, that's Egypt, that I believe is Jordan, Pakistan, Turkey, that's Greece, China's kind of purple. So what's going on in this area
Obviously,
that is making these few countries really not happy with
which
us?
obviously took too many resources from them in the beginning, and they're not paying us.
Took too many resources. These areas have been in constant conflict since during the Cold War, since before I was born. And in that conflict, America has been involved, at least in some way, for the most part. Between America and Russia in this area, it's been constant war. Next slide, please. Goal number 1, preserve the security of the United States. Absolutely. Our foreign policy, as you saw in the video that we showed earlier with President Trump, our foreign policy has to be protecting ourselves first. Main concerns: defeating radical Islamic terrorism, stopping nuclear weapons proliferation, limiting Chinese and Russian influence, and keeping North Korea isolated. Defeating radical Islamic terrorism. How has that materialized itself in our foreign policy? What does that look like?
Didn't Trump try to pass something?
Make it a ban?
The travel ban is definitely part of that.
Well, TSA being created.
Yeah. So when President Trump tried to pass the Muslim travel ban, and he's still going through what that's going to wind up looking like, that is absolutely part of one side of the aisle's views on what defeating radical Islamic terrorism
Or
is.
the propaganda in the media?
Absolutely. We've seen countless shows, movies, everything for the past 20 years depicting Muslims as the bad guys. That is part of propaganda promoting this. But mostly, guys, we have been at war in Iraq and Afghanistan since before some of you were born. We've been there since before I was born, but like actual perpetual war for almost 20 years now. That is what this is manifesting itself as. Stopping nuclear weapons proliferation. Thankfully, most of this stopped in the late 80s. there was a time when both the United States and Russia were building up an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons that Henry Kissinger, who was Nixon's Secretary of State, was once asked, we have more nuclear weapons than can destroy the world 10 times over. Why do we have that many? And he said, we like to see the rubble bounce. Meaning after we destroy a city, we want to destroy it again and again and again. That wasn't a good time to be alive. There was imminent fear and threat that in Russia or in the United States, like that, an entire city would be wiped out. So we came together with, at the time, the Soviet Union and decided that building up those nuclear weapons is not going to be the best way to achieve the peace and liberty that we're looking for in the world. So we started scaling those back. Limiting its Chinese and Russian influence. Anybody see anything about that in the media recently? About talking about Russia or China? It's all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So this is going to come in a few different ways. Chinese influence, that is mostly handled right now through trade policy. Actually, my last class we talked about our trade war with China. Russian influence, that's a little bit trade also, but that is manifesting itself a whole lot in Syria right now. There's a civil war going on in Syria, and Russia and Putin have kind of taken one side, and the Americans have kind of taken another side, but never really made those sides official, because it wouldn't be good if the United States and Russia came to a direct conflict.
Oh, yeah, that's it for us.
It could very well be, if depending on how they wanted to make it look, it could very well be. What has been going on with keeping North Korea isolated? That's another one that's been in the news a whole lot.
Scared of North Korea.
Were they what? They're scared of North Korea?
Yeah, they're scared.
There's a reason to be scared of North Korea. Why is that?
Because he got them bombs.
He does.
Yeah, and they don't talk to anybody. They're like really isolated on their own, so you don't know what they're coming up with. They got all this time on their hands.
Exactly. North Korea has been under the regime of the Kim family for 3 generations. Right now it's Kim Jong-un, and his grandfather is who started this whole regime, and they have been very, very, very isolationist, not talking to almost anyone.
Hiroshima.
Isolated The with people them. you don't know if they have
internet
internet
access like
Yeah.
that. They don't have access to super stuff.
They,
Right.
you never know. Hiroshima.
So keeping North Korea isolated because they don't talk to anyone, because they do have nuclear capabilities. We don't want them spreading out their influence very much. The little image that we had on the board that was for the history class before we started, it's kind of that policy. If one of those countries fell to communism, then the entire region could fall to communism. If North Korea is able to spread out to South Korea, then maybe they're able to spread out to Taiwan, maybe they're able to spread out to Thailand and just spread out their influence. So we want to keep them where they are. And that's also definitely going to play back right into the weapons proliferation and what we're doing with the Chinese, because our Chinese, even though we have heads with them, are probably our biggest ally in keeping North Korea isolated than Japan. Next goal, please, or next slide.
Sorry?
Islamic terrorism. These are the countries around the world that have nuclear capabilities. United States, China, Russia, the UK.
Oh,
How old is
Indies.
this?
Oh, Russia got everything.
How old is
They
this
say-
slide?
Yeah,
A few years old, why?
because we don't know what changing.
We have a pretty good idea of which countries have capabilities of nuclear arms and not, just because of the vast amount of resources required to manufacture them. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. There are probably a few countries, specifically in this area, that would love to be working on some nuclear capabilities, but we'd have a pretty good idea if they had it or not. Does it surprise anybody how many countries have? I mean, you gotta imagine that this is all one country, so it's a little more than it looks like.
Not either way,
The next one, please. Islamic terrorism, ISIS, big issue.
girl, that's some type of dedication. You about to kill yourself?
Yeah,
Is that
that's one of the big reasons that we want to keep it in check, because it's so unpredictable and terrifying. Next one, please. All right, goal number 2. This is one we definitely talked about: promoting world peace as part of U.S. foreign policy. War is expensive. It hurts trade and it promotes global instability. What are the costs of war?
Well, the
Resource.
population.
Good one. Human cost.
Money?
Money, absolutely. It costs treasure and it costs
Labor.
blood. It costs labor. When a country is at war, it can't produce the innovative products that it would want to. if we were at a full-scale war, what are the chances that the government goes to a few of the Ford auto plants and says, hey, instead of producing cars and trucks, we're gonna need you to start producing tanks, bombs, and planes, things like that, because we need those. And that would halt trade. So we can make more money if we are friends with our neighbors. And our neighbors can make more money if they are friends with their neighbors. So promoting world peace financially will be beneficial for everybody. However, some people don't see that because at the same time that Ford might not be able to make those bombs and cars and trucks, whatever company is making, I mean, Ford's not making those cars and trucks, making bombs and planes. The company is making those bombs and planes. Somebody's paying for those. So while war overall hurts trade and is expensive, there are a few individuals in war that will always profit, unfortunately. Next slide, please. Declare world peace. Don't we all wish that would happen? Goal number 3, maintaining a balance of power among nations. As long as the major powers are relatively equal in wealth and power, there is no reason to go to war. Do you agree with that statement? If
No.
2 countries are equal in wealth and power, then there's no reason to go to war?
No.
I feel like they're still gonna find a reason.
Yeah, people agree.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah. In theory, it makes good sense. If I'm the head of a country and every one of my citizens is happy and healthy and taken care of, and the head of another country is all of his citizens or her citizens are happy and healthy and taken care of, we should have no reason to go to war. But what happens if I find out that they have a material that
We know.
would produce clean, free energy for the next century? I might
And they
want
don't
that.
want to trade with you?
Yeah,
That's
they-
it for them.
Everybody needs.
Yeah, see, that's when I send the nukes.
So as long as, and well, also not just with the wealth, but power. So instead of me running a country that everybody's happy, and another person running a country everybody's happy, I have a country where I have 10 million soldiers. I could take over any country in the world with that many people. But there's another country out there that also has 10 million soldiers. I don't want to go to war against that person because it's a little too even. I like to go to war when I know I'm going to win. And 10 million versus 10 million, that's not a guaranteed win, or not an easy win at least. So the stronger other countries are and the wealthier other countries are, the less, in theory, we want to go to war with them. We've seen that that doesn't necessarily always work in practice. However, when you look at where we're currently at war, Iraq, Afghanistan, other countries in the Middle East, is the balance of power between the United States and those countries equal?
No.
We have a lot more power there.
That's it for people who join together and got their stuff together. That's it for. Oh.
Could be.
Have a good day.
Next slide, please. Balance of power, want to keep it even as possible. Make sure that one side doesn't tip to the other. Goal number 4, work with our allies to solve world problems. The days of America as the world's only superpower are over. We can achieve better solutions if everyone cooperates. What would this look like on the global scale?
Alright, we could see like Africa solve,
Mhm.
like if Russia and America can together and be like, oh, we could
Yeah.
fix that together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Saying, hey, one country out there really needs our help. Let's look at, there have been some tsunamis in Southeast Asia recently.
Mhm.
A country that is, an area that is relatively poor, Haiti, had a tsunami, an earthquake a few years back. And it's gonna be reliant on more than just one country to help that when the people are in need. Whether it be just because it's a greater undertaking than one country can take, or just because it's a lot easier than one country can take. And when certain problems come up, it's great because we see countries coming together that we never thought we'd see. There was a huge earthquake in India a few years back, and some of the first responders on the scene were the Pakistanis. And India and Pakistan historically hate each other. But when a tragedy struck the civilians of India, Pakistan was there. However, at the same time, does Puerto Rico have power yet?
No.
A lot of it still doesn't. Yeah, a lot of Puerto Rico still doesn't have power, and that is an American, it's not a state, it's American property.
Dang.
So even though you see some powers coming together to solve problems, you also see a lot of times that reflecting on how it looks for them to come together to solve those problems. If it looks good, they'll be there. If not, they might say, hey, someone else can handle it, or that's in Africa, we're in North America, why should we handle it? They're not our neighbors. But policy-wise, we should be working together. So can anybody think of an example of when, doesn't have to be recent, just any time when America has worked together with an ally for a non-war related goal?
No.
Part in apartheid for South America.
Yeah, absolutely. They helped stop apartheid. The most recent one that I'm thinking of, guys, is during the Obama administration. President Obama entered us into the Paris Climate Accord, which was an agreement with every country around the world other than, I believe, 3. One of those is North Korea, saying that we're all going to come together and reduce carbon emissions. We're going to help clean up the environment and work together to make a better environment for everybody. And one of President Trump's first things he did was in office was remove ourselves from the Paris Climate Accord. So an almost global treaty of every country coming together and saying we're going to clean up is out there. Unfortunately, America is no longer part of it.
Why did you do that?
He's him.
Profit over the environment. Next slide, please. NATO. Now I asked for an example other than war because thinking of treaties and allies during war is easy. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. On paper, it looks kind of like a trade organization. It's the North Atlantic countries, so mostly Europe, but also Canada, United States, Greenland, Iceland, those are technically Europe. But most of these countries, and like I said, on paper it looks like a trade organization, but what it really is a defense organization created during the Cold War specifically to dissuade the Soviet Union and Russia. It wasn't a treaty pact like in World War I, where an attack on one is an attack on all, essentially, but it did kind of work like that. It wasn't that on paper, but was that in practice. So if Russia decided to move forward, and this is what all part of the Soviet Union for, they decided to move into Poland. Actually, I think they owned Poland at the time, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, if they started moving into Poland and decided they wanted to take Poland back, essentially what that was saying is that an invasion of Poland would spark a war with Norway, Germany, France, UK, Spain, United States, Canada. So it wouldn't just be a war against one country if the Soviet Union, once again, not just the Soviet Union, that's in spirit who was designed to dissuade. A united Europe or a united North Atlantic countries is stronger defending against any single superpower that wanted to tip that balance of powers.
What
Next
Canada
slide,
don't wanna go to
please.
war? Do Canada have nuclear bomb?
No, I don't think so.
No one knows. See, y'all wanna know the real book. Just Canada.
I don't think Canada will be.
Y'all tripping.
The-
If Canada needs
The New York Police Department could probably beat the Canadian Army.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with the Canadian Army, I'm just saying that Canada doesn't put military first that much, and there might be more New York police officers than there are Canadian
because
soldiers.
they're unproblematic.
Yeah, they cool.
Alright, goal number 5, promote democracy around the world. People are happiest when the government works for them. Happy countries don't want war. This goes back into the same thing with the balance of powers to an extent. If I'm happy and my neighbor's happy, we don't need to go to war against each other. But if I'm happy in general, even if my neighbor's not, then I don't necessarily need war. If all my citizens are taken care of, then on paper, I shouldn't need to go to war. And democracy is, for its failings, the best way we found to make sure that all citizens are happy, at least where all citizens have some sort of voice. Let's go back to North Korea as our example. North Korea is completely dependent on Kim Jong-un. If he decided that he wanted to go to war with any other country in the world, North Korea would be at war with that country. In a democracy, it doesn't work that way. If President Trump wanted to conduct a military exercise somewhere, he could do that, but we learned already that he has a limit on how long or the scale that he can go with that. Also, if the people of North Korea didn't want Kim Jong-un to go to war with another country, there's nothing they can do about that. We can call our senators, call our congressmen, we can protest in the streets. That's the benefits of a democracy, where all of our voices can be heard. The government can at least take into consideration how we feel about things and act accordingly. So if 80% of the country wanted to go to war against Venezuela, President Trump might go to war against Venezuela. But if President Trump was going to war against Venezuela and 80% of the country was very against that, it very well might make him decide not to do it, or at least pause on that. What issues do we see with promoting democracy around the world?
Yeah, everybody want democracy.
Not everybody wants democracy. Like I said, as far as historically speaking goes, democracy is arguably the best way to promote happiness throughout your citizenry. But there are people out there that know what democracy is and don't want it. And when a foreign power knocks on their door with combat boots and M16 saying, here's democracy, that can start a conflict. Even though democracy is on paper and has done a very good job of de-escalating situations, there are times when democracy has been given to countries that have not wanted democracy, and there's always been blowback from that. Next slide, please. Goal number 6, increase global trade between nations. If everyone is tied together by trade, we are all more economically stable, and any war would only hurt everyone. Once again, kind of playing off of the balance of powers. If I am wealthy and happy, and another country is wealthy and happy, we don't need to go to war against anybody. Not only that, though, if my wealthy, happy country is doing business with another country, I want that country to be happy and healthy. Because if they're economically hurting, and I'm not, and especially if my country's doing well because of the trade that I have with their hurting country, that could cause tension. But if we're both happy and healthy, once again, no one's going to go to war. And I don't want that country to hurt because I want to be able to do business with them. I want whatever it is they're selling. So making sure that trade is strong, economies are strong, diminishes possibility of conflict. What countries do we have a significant trade with?
China.
Everything's made in China, right? Everything's made in China. China owns almost 40% of our debt. So while we have issues with China, while we have on and off trade war with China, we don't want China to go into conflict. We definitely don't want to go into conflict with China. That would be terrible for us, that would be terrible for China, and if the economies of the United States and China both tank, the entire global economy will almost certainly tank. Very few countries will benefit from that. Honestly, one of the only countries that would be fine would probably be North Korea, as long as they can go into the war because they're so isolated. I think we have another 1 or 2 slides. So what our assignment is going to be today, guys, we're going to go to foreignpolicy.com. Going to give you plenty of time for this, and we're going to hand out the laptops, and you're going to look for a few articles based on those 6 goals. When you're looking for those guys, you can search on there. Don't write out the whole goal. Don't write out, promote democracy worldwide. Go more for keywords. That'll help bring up a whole lot more. And also, after we give you a few minutes, and we're going to come together and discuss these. So even if you find an article that you think is interesting, tie it into foreign policy. Make me think, make me believe it, and that's going to be absolutely fine. So like I said, I'm going to give you plenty of time for this, walk around, give you all a bunch of help, and we're going to talk about articles that we find on foreign policy. Okay. Foreignpolicy.com articles on foreign policy. Can I get a volunteer to go first, talking about firsthand that I saw? What article did you read?
I picked Scandinavian won't be Russia's next target.
Scandinavia won't be Russia's next target. And how does that apply to the 6 foreign policy goals we talked about?
Okay, that's goal number. Well, actually, that's about. What was his name? That's about work with, that's with allies and all that. Because they got something to do with NATO.
Right.
Because their most likely targets to be Finland or Sweden, and they are by attacking a non-NATO country. They don't risk a proportional response in accordance with Article 5, but by targeting a European country, you can expect to reap the rewards of public approval from goals short justice from victory. So they can actually win against a non-NATO country, so that's why they will target a non-NATO country.
Gotcha. And as far as the Scandinavian countries, they probably think NATO's pretty important to them, right?
Yeah.
Because they need it.
Yeah, they
Good.
will.
Very good. Somebody else?
I got this one called the nuclear security slip up. It's about, Obama talking about, change the security of the new codes because they had a slip up. So he, announced his intention to review and rethink our system of classifying secrets.
Outstanding. So President Obama talking about how we're going to handle nuclear weapons. So which foreign policy goal does that meet?
Protecting, preserve security.
Outstanding. Good work.
I found what sex means for world peace, and that falls under goal 2 for promoting world peace.
Alright.
And I found that, it said that the larger the gender gap is between, found that the larger the gender gap between the treatment of men and women in society, the more likely a country is to be involved in extra and interstate conflict. And also it says that what happens to women affects the society, stability, corruption, health, range type, and even the power of the state.
Very good.
And especially like today, when like you see more and more women stepping up and having bigger roles in society, the more like unbalanced with the men.
Good. So you said that satisfies promoting world peace.
Yeah.
What else can that satisfy? If you're giving women a voice, but every person has a voice,
Oh, democracy.
promoting democracy. Very good. Very good. Anybody else want to go? What you got?
Alright, so my article is based off the first goal, which was preserving the security of the US. So basically it talked about the American military officials in the Pacific worried that the US and Chinese interests could collide in the island democracy, which was Taiwan. And the Chinese military intimidation to bully
Very good. What would be a good intervention for Taiwan or to help Taiwan out? Maybe if someone that was almost as powerful as China intervened on Taiwan's behalf?
Yeah, working with allies.
Working with ally, very good. Let's go 2 or 3 more. Anybody else wanna go?
We could get like points.
I wanna hear one of these 4.
She already stole my heart.
And you can tell it to me.
What? But the one about China?
Sure.
China was basically bullying the smaller neighbors, and I found this other article that connected with it. Trump wants NATO to watch China, so that's goal full.
Absolutely.
Work with allies to solve problems.
Absolutely. Working with NATO and Trump with China, working with allies. Very good. Let's go 1 more, guys.
Alright,
There we go, thank you.
Trump and Kim need to go small. Like when they had a meeting, they were asking for too big of unrealistic things from each other. Like Trump wanted Kim to abandon the nuclear program, which is not gonna happen. They have to take small steps before they get to that.
Good. So which foreign policy goal does that satisfy?
Preserve the security and promote world peace.
Excellent. Working with your allies or potential allies. Very good, guys. Anybody else have a comment on foreign policy before we move on to the next part? No. Great work today, guys.
Great job.